Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you are tuning in from. My name is Seuh, and this is episode number 2 of Sitting with Seuh. We have an excellent guest before. You may have seen them retweet your tweets. You may have seen it somewhere on your timeline, because I know I've seen it pretty much everywhere. But it is the creator of the VTuber retweeting bot, Nook. Welcome, 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 and please introduce yourself.
Well, as you heard, I am Nook, or at least that's what people started calling me. I did actually start without a name, but they started calling me that after the website that I run. So I rolled with it, I suppose. I run the VTuber retweeting bot, as well as a number of other bots and the NookGaming.com review website as well.
That is brilliant. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, you are primarily running this Nook Gaming website. What's it all about?
The Nook Gaming website, which by the way has nothing to do with Animal Crossing, as people keep thinking, I hadn't even played it until about a year ago. It's a website. It's mostly post reviews, though we also post other features as well, like sort of top whatever lists or occasionally other bits and pieces. But it focuses more on the more sort of detailed and analytical reviews rather than just someone's opinion on a game. Because that was kind of one of my sort of frustrations with a lot of reviews before starting it.
And when you say detailed analytical reviews, what do you mean when in terms of that when you were talking about video games?
So I suppose when we look at a video game, depending on the type of game it is, because it does tend to quite vary, I suppose, depending on like an RPG, a fighter, a visual novel, whatever it might be. We'd probably look at, say, I suppose, for example, if we're going to pick up an issue with the movement or something, we'd probably try saying not just, the movement's a bit sluggish or the movement doesn't feel natural or whatever else, but we'd probably try to figure out why that's happening. Like, are they going a bit too fast, a bit too slow? Is there a delay? And try to also potentially fit some examples in there as well.
So almost like QA testing them, right?
In a way, yeah. Actually, probably part of it is some of my background is in more analytical things like figuring out why things do or don't work. I used to do a bit of work in engineering, so long ago.
Oh, okay. And so, how did you start Nook Gaming? How did it become what it is now?
Well, I suppose at the start, or I suppose slightly prior to the start, I was working at another website, which goes unnamed, we'll say. But I sort of like I used to write for them, and I got sort of drafted into being their head editor eventually. But I ended up kind of finding that they were running kind of essentially a bit of a dodgy way, and there were other sort of disagreements and stuff. So, but I enjoyed reviewing, so I thought, okay, I'll just go ahead. I'll start my own website instead. Sort of like I'll post all my reviews sort of from there onward on my own website. Occasionally, cross promotion with Reddit, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it just sort of like took off from there, I suppose. I started getting lots of emails from sort of different developers and such asking for reviews of their games. And I thought, I can't really do all this, but it would be interesting to put on. So I started recruiting other people, and some of them also had other skills. Like we've got an artist who's come on who does things for us occasionally. We've got someone who's in PR who still knows a lot about that sort of thing. So it just sort of spiraled from there, I suppose.
Oh, nice. And we were speaking a little bit prior to this, but what sort of video games do you tend to review on your website?
So I think the speciality of the website is visual novels, but we also focus on essentially any sort of anime game. We'll post reviews of any game really, but it's definitely a big focus for us is things like the JRPGs or anything really with a sort of an anime aesthetic, I suppose.
Okay, and go on. What's your favorite favorite game in that sort of genre?
Well, that is probably a hard one to be honest.
Always is, always is.
I suppose if we're going for sort of like a favorite game or favorite visual novel in this case, since that's the genre I like the most, I might go for Alcana, I guess. it's like it's almost like sort of a sports anime in a way, which is strange because I don't actually usually like sports anime that much, but in like sort of a visual novel form. Um, there are things that I'd probably say are technically better and that I'd score higher than it.
Yeah.
That's probably my personal favourite.
Ah, I see. I'm currently playing through Neptunia Virtual Stars, and the gameplay is so repetitive, but I love how stupid and silly the Neptunia games can be.
Yeah, I've not played through that one myself, but I've played through some of the other Neptunia games, and the humour is definitely one of the strong points on it. If the gameplay might not always be, but um, I definitely do like Neptunia, and I actually wanted to play through that one myself, but someone else from the website reviewed it instead.
Ah, okay. Yeah, it's quite cool. I'm a couple of hours in. I think I'm close to finishing it now because I'm currently doing a video game series for it. But I did spend a solid maybe an hour and a half just trying to find some of the or unlock some of the Hololive VTubers that are featured in the game.
I've also heard that it's quite slow going at the start. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, it really is. Very, very slow. The story picks up a little bit later. I find the gameplay is very easy, but also when you're playing the game, you have access to the goddesses of Neptunia, and you also have access to playing as a set of VTubers. And just based on the gameplay and the way that everything works, there is basically no point of using anyone but Neptunia because she's just OP and she has the most mobility and she can shoot people from at range. So the rest of them are sort of close combat, very slow, not as damaging. It's just I get it because she's obviously the protagonist, and the game does a very very good gives you a reminder pretty much every time that she is the protagonist. But that's the Neptunia humor in there. But yeah, it's starting to get to a point now where it's very difficult. I just like the thing that I really love about it is that the guest appearances from all the different VTubers that are in there, they have like set storylines, set missions that you can do as well. So it keeps it a little bit refreshing.
Yeah, that is actually one of the things that interested me in the game as well, especially as I said with the whole live people starring in it. Since I suppose that's actually sort of where I was interested in VTubers before, but that's where it sort of came in. I think was with whole live, like a lot of people, and even now I'd probably still love to actually just see them pop up in game.
Yeah, that's a really good segue actually into the next question I was going to ask, which was how did your interest in VTubers come to fruition?
Well, I suppose, like I said, it was mostly from whole live initially. I think through. Luckily, I'm very thankful to all the people doing these translated clips because my Japanese is very poor, despite having lived over there for a while. So I think essentially with Carne especially was where it started. But then I sort of like moved on to like watching people like Marine and Pekura as well, especially the Minecraft series was quite fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
How long have you been watching VTubers for?
I can't remember, to be honest, but it's probably quite early on when they sort of like started to become popular, I guess. I mean, even before then, I sort of had some interest and I'd seen some of the earlier ones like His Eye and such.
Yeah.
I suppose sort of the main interest was maybe near the start of where Hololive became popular.
And so is it just the big mainstream VTubers that you watch, like the Hololive team, or do you watch I guess any of the Niji Sanji team or even the V Shoujo who are brand new to the scene?
Well, I watched some of the V Shoujo as well, especially Nyanas and Iron Mouse, I guess. And I really do like Fruit's design, especially.
Yeah.
I also watch a lot of the smaller ones as well, especially like a lot of the indie VTubers.
Okay. Anyone in particular?
Yeah. Sushi. She goes by Sushi Dog or Sushi.
Okay.
She speaks both Japanese and English, and she's an artist. I tend to like her streams because she's very, very sort of like calming and very sort of like casual to chat with. And unlike a lot of the big VTubers, she'll actually respond as a lot of the smaller ones will, but she'll respond when you actually talk to her.
I guess it's difficult for the bigger VTubers to always be able to reply to pretty much everyone in their chat when you've got thousands and thousands of people watching.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that's one of the blessings of the smaller VTubers, is that you can really cultivate that relationship between the viewers and the VTuber.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a strength. I suppose probably the same with any sort of streaming, really.
Why did this come about? You did mention you run a few other bots as well, but why specifically the VTuber Retweeter bot? What is its purpose?
So I suppose initially it was just a bit of a, well, on a whim almost, I suppose, because of my interest in VTubers, and because it was just really, it took probably about half an hour to spin it off from the visual novel Retweeter bot that I run.
Okay.
It sort of like went from there. So I think in the first sort of few days after I made it, it sort of noticed it was helping like a lot of these indie VTubers and like picking up a lot of their tweets. So I sort of modified it from there on, sort of in essence repurpose it, I suppose, to help promote the indie VTubers, and sort of promote them to help them also network with each other. And I think it's worked sort of quite well for that purpose after I changed not really too much.
That's quite interesting, because yeah, that's how I discovered it. All of a sudden, my tweets were being retweeted by this bot, and whenever I used the hashtag VTuber, the VTuber hashtag, and it was really weird sensation at first, because obviously I was getting hits off of likes and engagements just based off of the retweet that your bot was doing, because there are quite a fair amount of people that are following it and seeing it. So it is definitely doing, I guess, its job, if that your purpose was to kind of help generate and build that community. And I guess how difficult was it to make one of these bots?
I'd say to make a really basic one, it's not that difficult. I mean, just I'm not particularly good at programming, unfortunately. I'm really a beginner, and I tried following a guide to make it, or I suppose to make the visual novel, Tweeter bot rather, that preceded it. And it didn't work. So then I tried another guide. It didn't work. Tried another guide. Didn't work. But I sort of like picked up. I kind of like had to do a bit of background work to research. Okay, what's not working, and then I sort of like put together parts from all the different guides. And eventually it sort of like cobbled together in something that works. So I don't think it's too difficult for someone who's kind of got a basic understanding, and for someone who actually knows how to program, I imagine it'll be much easier. But I think the more difficult part, rather than making it, was actually getting it so there's a good quality feed come through.
What qualifies as a good quality feed?
I suppose it depends on the purpose, but in this case, since you wanted to sort of like promote sort of VTubers and act as more, in a way, more of like a community tool rather than anything else. You wanted to tweet things where people actually sort of like get to know each other, rather than just a constant like sort of influx of like, you know, I'm live, because a lot of those tweets really just get ignored.
Yeah. You know, having known this algorithm that sits behind it, it's quite interesting. Because it now, I guess, for anyone that's watching, we can use this insight to get that VTuber retweeter bot to retweet some of the stuff that we want out there. So yeah, I know you mentioned that it's not necessarily looking for those tweets where people are going live. So is it the live word that the retweeter bot is looking for to stop it from retweeting it?
Sort of. I mean, essentially anything that sort of like say is about YouTube or Twitch or going live, it reduces the amount of those that comes through. It doesn't block them completely, but it makes it more likely that it's going to choose a different tweet instead, basically.
Ah, I see. That's really interesting. What sort of challenges have you had to kind of overcome with this bot?
So I suppose, well, there's the initial challenge, which was essentially just experimenting until I did get a good quality feed. But even now, there are people, say, using like VTuber hashtags to promote really weird things like conspiracy theories.
Really?
And there are, yeah. So it's quite hard to filter those things out, or just like try to sell stuff on it.
Yeah.
And I mean, not actually relevant stuff like, you know, services and models. That's fine. But just like completely unrelated stuff. and there's also been people like posting sort of like hate stuff as well, or
Mm.
so because it essentially works mostly off hashtags and just like sort of filters down things. It's quite difficult because there's a limited amount of things that I can filter,
I see.
basically. Yeah, so if someone just like does it as a one-off and they'll keep changing what tags they use, I can't really filter specifically for them because it'll take up a slot almost, where I could use it to sort of like block off someone who's filtering, who's sort of retweeting like hate stuff constantly at
Yeah,
VTubers.
yeah. I see, I see. As it's, I guess it's a hobby project. Do you still constantly work on the bot now, or do you work on it regularly? Is it kind of just put aside?
I update it every so often. It's mostly just minor stuff, like if I discover a new tag, like if you remember when the whole VTuber praising thing came in.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's like updated to pick up that hashtag as well, because people were sort of like using that when it's trending and still use it occasionally now as well. And like other just little bits and pieces, like I updated it recently to include an LGB related VTuber tag,
Mm.
because I didn't know it existed beforehand, basically, and it came in. And I'll add people to the filter as well, but that's pretty rare. I think usually there's no one that's actually sort of like needs banning essentially.
Yeah, yeah. It's very obvious if you when you click onto the retweeter page, profile page, that it's being run by you. So, what impact has it had to you at Nook Gaming?
For the NookGaming website, the NookGaming.com website, it's probably not had a huge amount of impact. We have seen an increase in views,
Mm.
but I think we're not sure totally how much that's related because we have some other stuff happening at the same time. Like we've started doing the manga reviews and all that sort of stuff, which have been quite popular. And we've also had sort of like traffic coming in from elsewhere have been sort of increasing in search results. Um, on the Twitter accounts, I think quite a few people have been kind enough to follow the gaming Twitter accounts.
Mm.
Um, so that said, there's not been like a huge amount of clicks going through them, and like likes and retweets and stuff like that. There have been some which we certainly noticed the people who've done that,
Yeah.
and appreciate that. But I can't, even though we've like had a fair few people sort of follow it, there's not been like a huge increase in engagement, I think.
Right. I see. I see. Do you get VTubers, I guess, messaging the VTuber bot at any point, or tweeting at the VTuber bot? And is it just solely retweets, likes, and the fourth?
So I think there's a bit of interaction there. I mean, I'll tweet out myself occasionally as the VTuber bot.
Ah.
Essentially, if I notice something that's sort of interesting or want to get a community opinion or something like that,
Mm.
and you'll get people sort of tweeting at the VTuber bot as well occasionally. Just I usually don't notice them for quite a while because it's unfortunately it's an issue with Twitter because anytime that anyone like comments on something or interacts with something that I've retweeted,
Mm.
it puts a notification. So I leave like the computer for 20 minutes. I come back and it's gone over the maximum amount of notifications.
Yeah, yeah.
So I occasionally run some searches like specifically for mentions of the VTuber bot just in case, and I'll come up with some stuff. So if anyone listening has ever actually tweeted at me and I've not replied, that's probably why. Um, but yeah, I see DMs as well. I only check them occasionally. It's better to DM me at the NookGaming Twitter in case if you want to get to me directly.
Mm-mm. And with the DMs, are they basically are they trying to reach out to you at Nook Gaming, or is it like specific DMs for the bot?
Mostly for the bot, occasionally for NookGaming, but it's mostly stuff like this spam thing has been picked up, just to let you know, which is always appreciated. So I
Ah.
can just unretweet it, or occasionally it's sort of the more dramery stuff. Um, Unfortunately, like so and so's done such and such, and
Mm.
why are you retweeting them or whatever. Um, and sometimes it's if it's well evidenced and stuff, and it seems like it's worth banning them, then I might do. But just usually it's just accusations and stuff. So I don't really do a whole lot because in essence it's he said she said sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's there's a lot of that in the, in the VTuber community. It just pops up every now and then. You mentioned that you've got a background in like the analytics and stuff like that. What are some of the most popular types of tweets that it tends to retweet?
the most popular ones I've noticed, I don't have any sort of like hard analytics for it because it just tells me things like how many people have been viewing my profile, which is almost 50k actually at this point. So
Jesus.
that's quite a lot.
That's a lot,
I know.
yeah.
But it doesn't tell me like it tells me the more popular tweets that I've done, but not other people. But
I see, I see.
yeah, but what I have noticed is a lot of them do tend to be stuff like asking people how to come up with their VTuber designs, or generally where it's some kind of question and they drop your PNG. Basically, stuff where people can promote themselves, and usually it gets more when it's like an interesting way of doing it, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. And
But
so,
also a low effort, interesting way.
would you say from an analytical point of view that these drop your PNG tweets are probably the best way to go about getting yourself out there for promotion?
I couldn't say, to be honest, because I think some of them don't do very well at all, but some of them do really well. And as it's more, I think more the unique ones, I suppose. Like drop your PNG and I'll assign you something really interesting, like a little short story about you, or
Yeah.
like that kind of thing. But I don't know how many people actually go and follow the people off the back of that, I suppose. Because I'd say it's actually almost it might be actually better for the person doing the tweet rather than the person dropping the PNG, because they get a lot of engagement and retweets sometimes when they do that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're right. And so, when talking about engagement, obviously you can only see the stuff pretty much that you tweet out. But, what sort of tweets will result in high engagement from the account, versus what sort of tweets will result in low engagement?
From the account itself, I think again it's probably mostly things where people can promote themselves almost. Like one of the higher ones that I did before, where I posted like, I don't know if you've seen that little thing where it's got like your account and then all the people who interact with you as pictures around it.
Oh yeah, yeah, I've seen that. The little
Yeah,
circle net thing.
that's it. Yeah. So of course, because it's like a retweeter bot, it's probably a bit it's almost probably not as accurate, I suppose, as normal. But I used it as a who can you recognize sort of thing in here. Are you here? Like who's here? That sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And people obviously very happy to pop up and say, oh yes, that's me, or like point out their sort of like favorite VTubers on there and whatever else. I think it's probably just more of an interesting way, I suppose, to get your name out there. I guess the low engagement stuff tends to be very casual stuff, like here's my cat sitting on the keyboard or something like that. I'm blocking you actually doing the work.
Right.
Yeah, that's happened more than a few times when I was trying to update the VTuber bot, and I can't see the monitor because it's standing in the way and he won't move.
That's pets are always a fun thing to deal with. They always seem to turn up when you're doing something important.
That is very true. Yes.
And I guess if we're talking about more of the independent stuff, does the bot have any, I guess, favorite VTubers that it ends up retweeting a lot, or is it just completely unintentional if more people get hits from it?
I've noticed that some people do tend to get retweeted more than others, but I think it's more that they've figured out how the bot works, possibly, or just potentially by chance. But to be fair, that is actually the kind of instructions almost up on the website. I post a link occasionally. It's just on, was it NookGaming.com/VTuber Tweeter, I think it is. So pretty much anyone's got the information, but some people obviously just get picked up completely by chance, and some people I think do use it quite tactically. And I've had people sort of DMing on occasion to ask me questions about some of the mechanics behind it, which I usually will answer somewhat, but I'll keep the exact specifics secret. Because people do try to game the system, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no one that's intentionally picked up more than others. There are a few people who are intentionally not picked up, but that's again the sort of the drama stuff and the hate comments and all that sort of stuff.
Do you get a lot of people using the boost on the VTuber Tweeter?
Well, not a whole lot of people. The way I've done it so far is I've just really sort of like, I suppose, given away. I think it was about sort of between 10 and 15 the first 2 weeks, and then I switched it for another 10 to 15 people. So it's only sort of like a temporary thing that lasts a bit, and some people who did win use it more than others. We had someone I think used it once,
Yeah.
and then never bothered again. And some people tend to use it every time that they go live and such, and that's actually a bit less restricted as well, because that doesn't include a lot of the filters like against the YouTube, the live, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So I guess it's a cheeky way to get the bot to retweet your tweets whenever you do go live, so that you get more visibility.
Pretty much, yeah. I think I said in that one if they include the boost hashtag, basically it should retweet them every time. They should, because there have been a couple of occasions where it hasn't for whatever reason, as long as they're tweeting in English.
Yeah.
And then I have asked them, like, do actually make sure it is on topic to VTubing stuff.
How long are you going to run it? Is it going to keep going forever, or is there going to be a point where it kind of ends and you're done? Like, what are we doing with this?
I mean, that is a good question, to be honest. I suppose we'll see how long it actually keeps interest, I guess. And we'll hope that nothing changes on the background to stop it working. I mean, I used to follow a similar bot, the VR Gamer bot, I think it was. And just one day it just suddenly stopped working for months. It was. So a couple months after, I said, okay, I'll spin off the visual novel bot to make another VTuber. Sorry, not VTuber, VR Tweeter bot.
Yeah.
I sort of like I ran that for a while, but it was never quite as good as the VR Gamer one. And now it's started again. So there's probably not as much point to that. But I suppose if another bot comes along that's actually a lot better and gains a similar following or better following, I may stop it then. But hopefully I'll keep improving it and such. I know someone actually has created another bot because they're actually asking me questions about how to do it. I don't know
really?
what goes on in the background though. Yeah,
Okay.
which is fine, to be fair. I did think it was quite funny you're asking how to sort of like essentially copy something, but in the end it's more promotion, isn't it? So
yeah, and it's what they say. It's copying somebody is the best form of flattery, right?
that's it. Unfortunately, I can only help them out so much because they're actually doing it in a different language than I am. So
I see.
Yeah, I know they've got it up and running now. So
and the VTuber bot that you've created, it only focuses on English, right?
Yeah, only on English. Yeah.
So we're missing out on a whole bunch of other VTubers that are across the globe.
That's it. But I mean, if there is, like, say, a German VTuber or a Vietnamese VTuber or anything along those lines, if they're tweeting in English, then it'll still retweet them. But if they're tweeting in their native languages, then it won't. That was I wouldn't say it was a choice because that was actually in the default settings. Sort of like decided to keep it that way after I realised because I suppose essentially I've got my one of my friends Hatter over on another visual novel website, and sometimes I'll retweet his tweets, but almost the only times when I'll do it is when I actually add a little quote retweet to actually explain what it's saying, because most of my audience aren't actually going to understand German. So I imagine it's going to be the same sort of with the VTuber creator bot, where if almost all the audience can understand English, but maybe 1% of them can understand Vietnamese or something. It's probably not going to help out.
That makes sense. What weird tweets have you seen on this VTuber retweeter account?
I think the really weird stuff, I suppose, is when it picks up stuff that it really shouldn't. Like I think I mentioned before, the conspiracy theory stuff. So it sometimes picks up really weird stuff, like about how the government are controlling your brain, and how the vaccine is a microchip.
Oh no.
Yeah, it happens unfortunately with pretty much any popular trend, which I suppose is actually a good thing for the VTuber industry in a way, because it shows that people are actually specifically using the Ian VTuber hashtag to promote their completely off-topic stuff, meaning it is getting that popular.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true. So is there anything else that we should be knowing about this VTuber retweeter bot?
I suppose I'll say a couple things then. As a hint to the people listening to this, if they do want to get their tweets retweeted, they may want to watch the bot when it retweets. Because it's I've not made a secret of it, but it retweets every 10 minutes.
Okay.
So if you got your tweet in as like the latest tweet at that time when it retweets, it's more likely to pick it up, basically. So that's the little hint if you really want something to be retweeted.
That is a huge pro tip for everybody out there. They're going to start monitoring the clock now and every 10 minutes. Love
I
that.
suppose the other thing is that so in the future, if people keep using it, what I might want to do, if I can either potentially raise some funds for it, or if I can find someone who knows more than I do about coding, is try to create some improvements to it where the filter is improved, essentially to try get rid of, or at least reduce more the amount of all these people who are posting weird stuff to it.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially the ability to create a ban list that's longer than the short list I'm allowed to have at the moment. Because there are probably some things where I should have like blocked people from using it, but I thought, okay, it's not as bad as it could be,
Yeah.
and it like uses up a slot, so it's a bit unfortunate.
When you say using up a slot, what does that mean?
So essentially, the way it works at the moment is it runs a search that says like, okay, it can have like these hashtags, and it can't be from these accounts, and it can't use these terms, and so on and so forth, basically.
Mm.
But that search can only get so long. So if I
Uh,
go over that, it stops working.
okay.
So
So
if I have
that's what
like
you
20
mean.
names on or something,
Yeah, yeah. So then you can't basically that those 20 slots are filled and you can't use another one to kind of filter it.
that's it. There's also that some people have actually tried changing the names to get around it as well. So I've had to sort of
Oh,
like check in occasionally. But there are ways that I'm not totally sure how, but there are ways to actually do it using an account, sort of like an account number basically.
yeah.
And I know how to get their account number, but I'm not sure quite how to filter it. So I probably really do need to consult with someone who knows more than I do about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting and also a very cheeky way to get around the bot. But that is one thing I didn't know about Twitter as well. That I guess I just figured that if you change your username, it'll be fine. But I guess every account has almost like an IP address, but an ID number, right?
That's yeah, as an ID number. I think it's quite long, maybe sort of like about 25 characters or something, or
Mm.
possibly more. But it's
Ah,
it uniquely identifies your account.
yeah. Okay. Any final words that you'd love to give out to any VTubers, independent, mainstream, whatever the case may be, in regards to maybe getting their content out there, or even just any wise words of wisdom from you as a journalist?
Um, I suppose what I'd probably say would be one is keep trying, because I've been doing sort of like various sort of content creation, writing, and whatever else for years and years. And sometimes you might go to one of the things where you post a video and it gets like 10 views or something, and sometimes you post a video and it gets 100,000 views.
Mm,
And I've literally when I was doing YouTube stuff, I actually posted a video that got about 10,000 times my normal views suddenly, and then things really took off. So I think you can essentially have a sort of like lucky break in a way.
yeah.
Um, but there's also it's not all luck, and try not to compare yourself to other people, because there are people, especially big people, who do have the funds to do a lot more. People who can market themselves better with like other skills or money or whatever else. People who do have better models, whatever else. So I think there are a lot of people who might compare themselves and like wonder why they're not taking off, and maybe feeling a bit down about it.
Mm.
But sort of like trying to level up your own skills, finding out more knowledge about how to promote yourself, and just keep trying. And hopefully, not everyone will get somewhere, but a lot of people will.
Love that. Love that. And finally, where can we find you? Give us a social media plug.
Well, of course, you can find me at the VTuber Tweeters. You probably know, I'm sure, but I also run the Twitter account at Nook site, which is for the gaming website. So you can DM or mention me there, and actually we'll see notifications there, unlike on the VTuber thing. And you can also, of course, look on the website itself, or email me at contact@NookGaming.
Well, thank you so much for introducing yourself and giving us an insight in this VTuber retweeter bot, Nook. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. And you know what? I think all of you that are listening today have learned something. I've learned something. I'm definitely going to be checking the time for when I'm going to be retweeting, because now I know some pro hacks.